those with political ties to controversial governments. The individual was accused of openly supporting the government in Asmara, Eritrea's capital, a regime widely criticized for its authoritarian rule and human rights abuses. Israeli authorities allege that his activities included participating in rallies and events that promoted the Eritrean government's agenda, raising concerns about foreign influence and the safety of the local Eritrean community. This deportation signals a notable shift in Israel's immigration policy, as the government moves to draw a clearer line between those seeking refuge from persecution and those who are seen as supporters of oppressive regimes. Officials have stated that the new policy aims to protect public order and national security, especially in light of recent unrest involving Eritrean factions within Israel. The man, who had lived in Israel for over a decade, was deemed a threat to public order after violent clashes erupted in South Tel Aviv between rival Eritrean groups. These confrontations left dozens injured and highlighted deep divisions within the Eritrean diaspora, prompting Israeli authorities to take decisive action. Israeli officials argue that individuals who actively support the Eritrean regime cannot be considered genuine asylum seekers, as their allegiance to the government contradicts claims of fleeing persecution. This stance has led to increased scrutiny of asylum applications and more rigorous background checks for migrants from countries with repressive governments. By carrying out this deportation, Israel is setting a precedent that signals zero tolerance for those who are perceived as hostile regime supporters. The government hopes this will deter others from engaging in similar activities and reinforce the message that Israel will not serve as a safe haven for those who promote violence or unrest. The decision has sparked a heated debate within Israeli society. Some citizens and lawmakers have welcomed the move, arguing that stricter controls are necessary to maintain security and public order. Others, however, have voiced strong criticism, warning that such actions risk undermining the rights of migrants and asylum seekers who genuinely need protection. Within the Eritrean community in Israel, the deportation has heightened tensions and fears. Many migrants worry that their political views or associations could be used against them, leading to further expulsions or discrimination. Community leaders are calling for dialogue and understanding, urging authorities to distinguish between peaceful dissent and genuine threats. Human rights organizations have condemned the deportation, warning that it could mark the beginning of a politically motivated campaign against African migrants in Israel. They argue that such measures risk violating international conventions on the protection of refugees and could set a dangerous precedent for other countries. As the story continues to unfold, this expulsion has ignited a broader debate in Israel about national identity, security, and the country's responsibilities toward vulnerable populations. The outcome may shape the future of immigration policy and the lives of thousands of migrants for years to come. The man at the center of this story remains nameless, his identity carefully shielded from the public eye. He is one of thousands whose lives unfold in the margins, invisible to most, yet deeply affected by the tides of politics and conflict. His anonymity is not just a matter of privacy, but a reflection of the precarious existence many asylum seekers endure, always at risk, always uncertain, and always in the shadows of society. His journey is emblematic of countless African asylum seekers who have come to Israel, fleeing violence, repression, and poverty in their homelands. Like many, he arrived with hope for safety and a better future, but quickly found himself navigating a world of suspicion and hardship. The streets of Tel Aviv became both a refuge and a battleground, where dreams of belonging clashed with the harsh realities of life as an outsider. Arriving in 2011, he settled into a life marked by instability. He took whatever work he could find: cleaning, construction, odd jobs that paid little but kept him afloat. Amidst this struggle, he tried to build a home for his young child, determined to provide a sense of normalcy, despite the uncertainty that surrounded them. Every day was a balancing act between survival and hope, between blending in and holding on to his identity. Unlike many in the Eritrean community, who kept their political views private out of fear, he chose to openly support the Eritrean regime. This decision set him apart, making him both a visible figure and a controversial one. His public stance drew suspicion from fellow migrants who opposed the regime, and it made him a target for those who saw his loyalty as a threat to their own safety and aspirations for freedom. In April 2025, his life took a dramatic turn. A domestic dispute escalated, and he was arrested after allegedly brandishing a machete. The incident, though rooted in personal conflict, quickly attracted the attention of Israeli security services. The presence of a weapon and his known political affiliations raised alarms, transforming what might have been a private matter into a case of public concern. Authorities began to view him not just as a criminal suspect, but as a potential threat to public order. His vocal support for the Eritrean regime, combined with the violent incident, led officials to question whether he was acting on behalf of foreign interests. Security agencies intensified their scrutiny, worried that his actions could destabilize an already tense migrant community. What started as a criminal investigation soon evolved into a complex political case. Lawyers, judges, and government officials debated whether his actions were simply the result of personal strife, or if they were part of a broader pattern of regime influence within the Eritrean diaspora. The courtroom became a stage for larger questions about loyalty, identity, and the responsibilities of a host country toward its most vulnerable residents. As the case unfolded, security services argued that his behavior was fueling divisions and tensions within the Eritrean community in Israel. Protests erupted, with some migrants demanding protection from regime supporters, while others called for unity. The atmosphere grew increasingly charged, and the man's story became a flashpoint in a much larger debate about migration, security, and belonging. In the end, his narrative shifted dramatically, from that of a vulnerable asylum seeker searching for safety to a suspected agent of a foreign regime. His fate now hangs in the balance, a stark reminder of how quickly life in the shadows can change, and how the search for refuge can become entangled in the politics of fear and suspicion. The deportation stemmed from a domestic incident in April 2025. Arrested with a machete, the man's political ties drew scrutiny. His case shifted from criminal to national security concern. Transferred to given detention, his deportation path was set. Authorities argued his presence threatened public order. Evidence of regime support was presented to justify expulsion. The refugee and asylum law allowed his deportation as a security risk. He was seen as a destabilizing force, not a genuine asylum seeker. The machete incident became a symbol of broader security concerns. His deportation sent a clear message against regime support. The deportation unfolded under a shroud of secrecy and heightened security measures on the night of November 3, 2025. Israeli authorities, aware of the potential for public backlash and international scrutiny, orchestrated every detail with precision. The operation was not just about removing an individual, it was about managing a complex web of legal, political, and diplomatic risks. Security forces were deployed in large numbers, and the airport was placed on high alert, with armored vehicles stationed at key entry points to ensure that the transfer would proceed without incident or interference. The man, who had spent years in legal limbo, was quietly moved from the given detention center in the early hours before dawn. Escorted by a heavily guarded police convoy, he was driven through empty streets to Ben Gurion Airport. The authorities took great care to avoid drawing attention, choosing a time when the city was still asleep and the roads were nearly deserted. The transfer was swift and efficient, reflecting the government's determination to avoid any last-minute legal interventions or public demonstrations that could disrupt the process. The entire operation was meticulously planned to sidestep legal challenges and prevent the mobilization of activists or human rights organizations. In the days leading up to the deportation, authorities monitored potential protest sites and increased police presence in public squares, anticipating possible resistance. Legal documents were processed behind closed doors, and only a handful of officials were privy to the full details of the plan. One of the most significant obstacles was the absence of direct diplomatic relations between Israel and Eritrea. This lack of formal ties made the deportation process far more complicated, as there was no straightforward channel for communication or coordination between the two governments. The Israeli authorities had to navigate a maze of bureaucratic and diplomatic hurdles, relying on intermediaries and back-channel negotiations to facilitate the expulsion. To overcome these challenges, officials devised an indirect route for the deportation. Instead of sending the man directly to Eritrea, he was flown first to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and then to Entebbe, Uganda, before finally reaching Asmara. This circuitous journey was carefully chosen to avoid direct contact with Eritrean authorities at any point during transit, reducing the risk of diplomatic incidents or unwanted attention from international observers. The use of international transit zones and third country airports allowed Israeli officials to maintain a degree of plausible deniability and minimize the visibility of the operation. By keeping the man in transit lounges and away from public view, they ensured that the deportation would not attract media coverage or spark protests from advocacy groups. This strategy also helped to avoid any direct engagement with the Eritrean regime, which could have complicated the situation further. The journey itself was fraught with tension and uncertainty. Security personnel remained on high alert throughout, and government officials coordinated closely with their counterparts in Ethiopia and Uganda to ensure that each leg of the trip went smoothly. The man, aware of the risks he faced upon return to Eritrea, appeared anxious and withdrawn, his fate hanging in the balance as he moved from one airport to the next under constant surveillance. For Israeli authorities, the operation was a delicate balancing act. They had to weigh domestic security concerns against their obligations under international law, particularly in light of criticism from the United Nations and human rights organizations. Every step was documented and reviewed by legal advisors to ensure compliance with both Israeli and international standards, even as the process remained shrouded in secrecy. The indirect route and covert procedures were designed to minimize political fallout, both at home and abroad. By keeping the details confidential and limiting the number of people involved, the government sought to prevent leaks and avoid sparking a diplomatic crisis. The operation was a testament to the lengths officials were willing to go to maintain control over a highly sensitive and controversial issue. After a journey spanning several countries and countless hours, the man finally arrived in Asmara, the capital of Eritrea. His return marked the end of a 14-year chapter in Israel, a period defined by uncertainty, legal battles, and the constant threat of deportation. As he stepped out of the airport with his belongings, his future remained uncertain, shaped by forces far beyond his control. The entire operation underscored the complex geopolitical maneuvering required in such cases. Israeli officials faced intense scrutiny from the international community, and every decision was weighed for its potential impact on foreign relations, especially in a region as volatile as the Horn of Africa. Ultimately, Israel's handling of the deportation highlighted its precarious diplomatic position in the Horn of Africa. The government's actions reflected a careful calculation of risks and rewards as it sought to assert its domestic policies while navigating the intricate realities of international diplomacy. Israel defends the deportation as a lawful security measure. The refugee and asylum law allows expulsion for public order risks. The man's violent conduct and regime support justified the decision. Security services presented evidence of his active regime promotion. The government differentiates genuine refugees from regime supporters. This case sets a precedent for stricter immigration policies. Israel aims to manage security within legal bounds. The deportation is framed as a necessary action, not a rights violation. Violent clashes in Tel Aviv highlighted Eritrean community tensions. Riots erupted over Eritrean embassy events, sparking political violence. The violence pressured the government to act on immigration. Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to deport illegal migrants. The deportation of the regime supporter was a direct response. It targeted an agitator, not all migrants, to show resolve. The action addressed unrest's root causes while navigating legal challenges. The government demonstrated control over the situation. Human rights groups condemn the deportation as legally and morally wrong. They argue returning anyone to Eritrea risks persecution. The deportation is seen as politically motivated, setting a dangerous precedent. Critics fear a broader campaign against asylum seekers. The case raises concerns about political profiling in immigration control. Activists warn of a chilling effect on the Eritrean community. The deportation highlights the tension between security and human rights. Israel views it as a necessary security